Hi everyone. Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today. During this webinar, we'll provide concise, informative information on user interfaces, including needs analysis, design development, and implementation. Quick reminder who we are: Marketing Technologies and Manufacturers Rep firm that provides OEMs all over the Western US with the most capable suppliers in North America. We are responsive manufacturing experts, and most importantly, we thrive on problem solving by combining our expertise with that of our excellent manufacturers, one of which we're joined by today, Nidec-VIS. For over 40 years, we've exclusively represented US-based manufacturers of plastics, metals, and electronics, and we partner with OEMs like you to help solve your manufacturing challenges. After our gift card drawing, we'll have questions and answers, so please chat any questions to us in the chat window on the right side of your screen.
Thanks, Jim. I'm Rich Baraki. I focus my attention in Utah, Idaho, Nevada, and the Montana region. I'm going to briefly go through the agenda for today's webinar. First, we'll start off with some guidance on how to approach user interface, cover some various user interface technologies, present some questions to ask as a guide to your user interface design, go over some real-world case studies, review the key takeaways, determine who the lucky winners are for the gift card drawing, and then head into Q&A.
Thanks for that, Rich. Looks like we're going to cover a lot of ground today, so I'm glad we brought reinforcements. Our webinar will feature the technical expertise of Valmark Interface Solutions, or VIS. You'll also see references to Nidec, which is VIS's multi-billion-dollar parent company headquartered out of Japan. VIS has been delivering custom interface solutions for 45 years. They started out in Silicon Valley producing simpler components like labels and graphic overlays. And over the decades, VIS has continued to evolve to support higher levels of electronic assembly. VIS is well positioned to serve the North American market, boots on the ground in China for materials sourcing, state-of-the-art production in Monterrey, Mexico, and US-based engineering, project management, and customer service. VIS has about 225 employees and a quality system that is ISO 1345 certified. And for those of you not in the medical world, 1345 is the medical ISO standard, and it's basically like ISO 9001 on steroids. VIS serves a variety of markets, mentioned medical, but also industrial, electronics, and others, and all of their customers get to benefit from that medical-grade quality system. In terms of capabilities, VIS can support your project from the concept stage all the way to final assembly and mass production. And we're excited to have with us today the anchor of all things technical at VIS, Bill Canon, VIS's VP of Product Development and Engineering. Thanks for being here, Bill. We appreciate your time and insights here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and then take us into our interface presentation.
Thanks, Joel. My name is Bill Canon. As mentioned, I'm the VP of Product Development and Engineering with Valmark Interface Solutions. A little bit about my background. I'm a double E by undergrad education, and I've really been in user interface near my entire career, and that embarrassingly spans probably over 30 years or so. I have an MBA as well from Boise State University, and I've held roles through multiple companies through my career, from engineering management, new product development. I've held COO roles and currently in the VP role. I probably have been involved with over 1,000 different product launches over my career, everything from nuclear subcontrols to literally bologna slicers, everything in between as well. So I'm glad to be here, and let's move it forward. You know, I'm biased, as you might imagine. This is one of my favorite quotes. As far as the customer is concerned, the user interface is the product. And you know, it reminds me of a quote from a professor that I had in undergrad of Chevettes and Corvettes. Chevettes and Corvettes, they're both cars. They both have four wheels. They have windshields. They have a steering wheel, but they are really not the same. And user interface is a lot like that as well. You know, if I think about also a QWERTY keyboard, the keyboard that perhaps you see on the screen right now from the Apple product, most QWERTY keyboards are the same. There may be some differences with wireless or backlighting and perhaps some form factor, but they all do the same thing. They're meant to engage with your computer system for you to enter data into that. And when you think about that and the importance of user interface, imagine yourself that we probably have all have done, go down to Best Buy or electronics store and looking for a keyboard, and you engage with each of the keyboards, you feel how they are, you feel the tactile sensation. You're judging on, can I use this device to control my computer, my device, the motor, what have you. So it's important, and you make buying decisions based on how that keyboard feels. And that's why I love this industry. There's a qualitative component to everything that we do while we're applying heavy science as well. So when I think about the devices and all the myriad, thousand, billions probably of different types of devices out there, it matters to what you're trying to do. The smartphone that we see on the left side, that's very common right now. There's a new language that is occurring right now in the form of gesturing and pinch and zoom. And then, excuse me, and you can imagine that that's the right kind of technology that is applied right now. Imagine now us going back to the Motorola Razors and some of the devices where you have a physical keypad on the phone. We won't accept that really anymore. So user interface is very appropriate for the displays-based technology for a smartphone, but it may not be the exact same type technology required for a printer, for example. In the printer controls, you probably are not making buying decisions based on the user interface, but you don't want the user interface to prevent buying decisions. So in a printer type situations, it's quite benign. You want it to be easy to use. You don't want to think about it. You want effectively the printer to print. So the spectrum, if you will, of user interface controls and devices and technologies is pretty wide. In the context of what we're talking about, it generally spans from simple membrane switches that you might see on your microwave at home to displays-based type technologies with different technologies of touchscreens. Sometimes those are integrated in amongst other types of controls to other higher levels of assembly where we're integrating a myriad or different types of technologies as well. Each one of these has their own facets and technology options and things that you can do to fit the technology to your end device. A quick example, on the membrane switches on the left-hand side, you may want a tactile feel, you may want a light feel or a heavy feel, you may want bright colors or subdued colors, you may need shielding and different types of options there. So, while the user interface spectrum universe is quite complex, we're here to try to make it less complex and to help out with that. So how do you do that? How do you walk through when you're very early in your product development life cycle? What are the types of questions that make sense to steer yourself towards a technology versus perhaps another kind of technology? Really the most important question is the top one. How do you want your customers to interact with your product? Is it a touch-based? Is it push buttons? And really the second question is related with it. What types of controls are compatible with your market? If you're in the smartphone market, you kind of need to be thinking about, in general terms, that I'm going to have to go with the displays-based touchscreen type control, where perhaps if we're on an ocean liner or a tanker ship, that kind of control may be entirely different. Different folks are using it. There's different environmental considerations that need to be realized, and that brings us to the third one, the operating environment. Very, very critical. It could be a clinical environment or an indoor environment. it may be an outdoor environment. It matters whether the control perhaps is on a gas pump facing south in Phoenix, Arizona, as opposed to that same pump working in Alaska, and Fairbanks, and the environment there. We would choose technologies that allow us to be able to seal and be robust enough to be able to handle those kinds of environments. UV radiation is one that's also very, very critical. And the operating environment as well may dictate or may influence the types of controls, especially if it's a benchtop type unit, a mobile device, those kinds of considerations as well. The product lifecycle and durability expectations. Many consumer products, toys, for example, they don't have a high expectation on life cycle. The button on a doll, for example, may realistically only have to work 5 times before the value of that product is achieved. But there are also critical devices out there where product life cycle is important. A true 1 million cycles required might be there. And the durability expectations as well, as if it's a mobile device, it needs to be designed in a rugged manner. We need to be able to choose the right kind of user interface technologies that will achieve your end market durability expectations. Power, mechanical connectivity requirements. Sometimes it's just not possible to fit a touchscreen into a mobile device based on what your product is all about and what it's meant to do out in the world. Sometimes those are limiting factors. Power is one as well, especially if you have backlighting or you have a mobile product and you're concerned about battery power, et cetera. And ultimately, we have to balance all of this. We're really looking for an optimized type solution here, and it comes down to budget. A lot of folks want the iPhone touchscreen and that kind of control. That's great. The tooling and the blue sky R&D that went into that kind of technology is sometimes not necessarily appropriate for other kind of controls based on cost. But really the budget it raises all ships in regard to the types of controls that you need, and that's our goal, is to optimize all of these questions into a product for you. It can be anything, but it has to be something, and that's what we're here to help you with. I'd like to move forward in some examples now to shore this up. The first thing that we're looking right now, as you may recognize, it's generally a consumer device. It's a metal detector. Metal detectors are hot right now in the COVID times. A lot of folks are buying up metal detectors as hobbies and going out and searching for relics. The price of gold is up, so it's a hot product right now. They chose together a membrane switch application for this device that you see on the screen there, and they chose that because it's lightweight, it's generally low cost, it's appropriate, the number of controls are appropriate. You can imagine you're using that device with your thumb, so tactile feel needs to be in a good way, so you don't get thumb fatigue, if you will. And we also provide some optical bonding on the display. And what that really means is that there's a rigid lens behind that we optically bond to the device. And you can understand that as we're using this device, and I've actually used them, when you get a hit, then often what you do is you throw this whole metal detector onto the ground. So ruggedability is a very key feature to this as well. And ultimately, this can be used in the rain, in the snow, in the sun, and dusty environment, dirty environment. So this technology allowed us to optimize the solution, but most importantly, create the sealed solution so the product can work through time. Another example that we have is an industrial and construction environment. This is a Paver Controller, the heavy equipment that sometimes you see when they're paving new roads and freeways. This is not necessarily meant to be a sexy type product. This is an industrial control. It has to work every time. It has to be simple to use. There's a lot going on with this type of product in regard to integration. There's a display. There's a rigid window that is optically bonded, the membrane switch underneath, elastomeric buttons, and backlighting. It is meant to be very easy to use, very easy for construction workers with gloves and in an extremely and dirty and rugged environment to be able to use easily and quickly and to see the controls in a quick manner. On almost the other side of the universe, we have a medical device, a dialysis machine, where these types of machines are being deployed across the U.S. and already are for those folks who need periodic dialysis treatments. And the application here and the technologies chosen were because there is a lot of information that is going on at one time. So we need a very large display. There are multiple controls happening to be able to operate the device and engage with the patient. And sometimes there's byproducts of needing to go with a large panel. And in this case, we chose a resistive touch panel because, as dialysis implies, there's blood and fluids in the environment. So the device needs to be cleanable, needs to be wiped down, cleanable with that. And that's why we went with the contiguous first surface of that. As I say that, I recognize that we need to be very clean, and yet somewhere on the red button there shows some staining going on there on the stock photo there. But when we have a large resistive touch panel like this, sometimes the negative consequence of that is what's called Newton rings. Newton rings, if you can kind of imagine what oil looks like in water, the little iridescent rainbow effects that can sometimes occur when you have two petro-type materials come together. And in the middle of the display screen, that was occurring. So we were able to mitigate through some dielectric dots, we would call them, some added processing to eliminate that effect. So this product can still engage a large resistive touch panel in this kind of environment. And then the final case study that we have is yet another medical device. It's the previous one that we just looked at was very large. This one is very small, and it's a mobile device, and it was meant, it's cardiac monitor. And it's meant to be worn on the hip, and as such, it needs to be a very rugged device. But we're packing a ton of technology into the device, and it really just needs to be easy to use. A touchscreen and one button. It is very smartphone-ish. Most of us now know how to navigate through screens and functionality based on just these two primary user interface technologies. This one just happens to have a capacitive touchscreen on the first surface, a custom cover lens, and a single backlit button, and there's PCBAs, haptics. For those of you who are not familiar with haptics, haptic is the vibration feedback that you feel most commonly with your phone, your mobile phone, your smartphone. The Nidec Motors, who is our parent company, all of those devices have Nidec components in there. And so finally, to wrap it up in the interest of time, we've the customer interactions are incredibly important. How do you want your customer to work with your device? It's something that you need to work out, but it's something that we can help you with. The types of controls out there, there's an extreme variety out there. There is a solution for you. It's our job to find it, and we can find it together. Environmental considerations and temperatures and humidity, we've discussed that, and there's technologies that are more suited for different environments than others. Product life expectations are definitely an expectation. If you expect the device to work for 5 times in a Christmas toy doll type of situation, as opposed to a medical clinical device on a benchtop that's going to be in a laboratory for 5, 7, 8, 10 years or more. Those are considerations to take. Of course, electronic mechanical limitations, and finally, budget. It's really our role and our job to try to get the technologies deployed in your project, in your product, at the lowest optimized price, lead time, and functionality as we can. So with that, I know I went quick on a lot of different topics. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everybody, and I thank you.
Wow, Bill, that was a ton of great information. My apologies, I'm having an audio issue here, but I must admit, during the metal detector case study, all I could think about was my neighbor during our Colorado blizzard a couple weeks ago, who left his snow shovel out in the yard somewhere and he forgot where it was. So he probably could have used those. It sounds like they can be used out in the snow. So I just wanted to see here if we can sum up some key takeaways for everyone. So much great information, and this is the moment in the webinar where we say, hey, everyone in the audience, stop writing emails, stop multitasking. You need to remember these principles here, because they're going to start you on the right path early in your project. First is take the approach of asking the right questions. So it's critical to match your product's interface with how your customers are going to use it. You know, people don't care what your product does necessarily, they care what it does for them. So it's important to challenge yourself with tough questions during the development of your device. We gave you a list of examples here. There might be more to the story depending on your product and your market requirements. We're happy to work with you on defining those key questions and your product requirements. Once you've asked and answered those questions, it's time to find the right fit in terms of interface technologies that will deliver the best customer experience. And this takeaway goes hand in hand with our last one, which is engaging the right partner. You know, unless you have a team dedicated to interface development at your company, which a lot of our customers don't, it can be so important to work with suppliers on the outside that specialize in these technologies and can help you navigate that selection, sourcing the technologies, and manufacturability of your product.
Thanks, Joel, and thanks again, everybody, for joining us today. And now it's lunchtime. This will be a future lunch for you or for a charity of your choice. We're going to pick 3 gift card winners and then jump right into our Q&A. So our 3 winners are going to be Sean L., Brian S., and Jim C. And remember, please send your questions to us via the chat window, and we'll jump into the Q&A.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, so our webinar attendees have been chatting and emailing us some questions throughout the presentation. So we'll start working through these questions with Bill now. Looks like the first question is, what is an economic starting point in terms of quantities for this type of user interface as compared to using a PLC with a basic touchscreen or control panel buttons?
That's a great question, and the answer is it depends. Not to be flip, but you know, and I'm not sure which type of user interface we're speaking of, but I'm gonna infer that we're talking about a capacitive touchscreen or some sort of touchscreen displays-based user interface. You know, costs are coming down, but we also recognize that there are excellent off-the-shelf type PLC touchscreen products out there that may work perfectly well in the application, especially for machine control. What often happens when we're approached for those who are using standard off-the-shelf type PLC controllers is some level of customization that's required, whether that's just a simple color or a logo add or some other functionality. And you know, we can help with that in some cases. You know, and also, in respect to capacitive touchscreens, projective capacitive touchscreens, really only 5 years ago, it was often prohibitive to be able to to integrate that technology into your device. The costs are going down while performance is going up. I really do think that we're on the eve of full glove and water immunity and a projective capacitive technology. So, you know, it's really it really depends. Most of what we work through, we provided products from 5 units a year to 5 gajillion units a year. But most cases, and I'm projecting here, but several high hundreds to several thousand is usually the starting point to be able to start to have that conversation. But again, it depends, and I would welcome the opportunity to talk more about it offline. Thank you.
Great answer, Bill. We had another question that came in with how much this industry seems to be growing. What is the most common touchscreen technology being used today?
Yes, great segue. It really boils down to 2. There's a lot of different technologies out there. There's capacitive, projective capacitive, resistive, acoustic wave, infrared, and so on. And it really is based on application and intended environment. If it's an outdoor situation or it's clinical, the resistive touch panels are awesome and integrated and designed in properly. They are very popular, very, very robust and popular. They also work extremely well with gloves at this time and very cleanable. And it's still typically the lowest cost option, as most common microprocessors out there already have on board functionality for resistive touchscreens. But really, the children in the world and us as well are growing up engaging with devices on the smartphone. The pinch and zoom, multi-touch type gesturing that we're using, it is growing up in our vernacular. It's our language now. And so projective capacitive touchscreens are going to be common. I was at the airport more than a year ago because I have not traveled since then, but I saw folks actually trying to engage with the arrival and departure screens as if it was a touchscreen. So that was, the touchscreen, and everybody's assuming now that most displays are touchscreen in some regards, and it just depends, Joel, on the application.
Great answer, Bill. And yeah, I've had that same experience at the airport. We all spend a lot of time there, and when it's not a touch screen, you're surprised. So here's another question. Good question for us. Do you work with customers to develop proprietary user interface technologies?
Well, yes, certainly, and the reason I'm hesitating here a little bit is just the recognition that almost every product that we've ever designed and developed and manufactured is unique in its own way, and it's proprietary in its own way. We don't own the intellectual, we don't own the design. Our OEM customers own the design. We're working together to create a solution that is both appropriate for the intended market and users, but also manufacturable, and as such, we're able to manufacture it with the highest of the quality expectations. So, business case warrants as usual, but as I mentioned earlier, this is why I like this industry, is because we get so many different applications coming through, and in most cases, there is something about the design and development that is unique to that customer and to that product. Thank you.
Yep, makes plenty of sense. We've got another question that's come in here, and I think it's probably being framed in the context of the product development cycle. The question is, when is the best time to engage a user interface supplier?
Yeah, great question. Oftentimes, user interface is the last thing that folks start to design. They've created this product and it's beautiful and it's fully functional, but then they're like, oh crud, we got to put some buttons on here. We got to put a user interface on there. And as you know now, my philosophy is user interface is really the most important part of the product. So we like to be involved as early as possible when artist renderings, concept drawings even, sometimes the best time for us. We can see things behind the scene, if you will, during development for keep out areas or putting switches too close to displays or just basically the mechanical limitations of what we're seeing. So we really would like to be in as early as possible, part of your R&D team if that's appropriate. We get it. A lot of folks, don't want to engage that early, but the earlier we are engaged, the better your final product is going to be. Thank you.
Well, Bill, that's great, and obviously your experience comes through. As we wrap up, just a quick reminder, we'd be delighted to provide a product or market-focused presentation customized to your product and company. We're happy to present either via webinar or on-site, obviously socially distanced with all the appropriate protections. You can reach out to us via phone, email, or on LinkedIn. And most importantly, I want to thank Bill Canon of VIS, our team at Marketing Tech, and especially appreciate all the attendees today for spending your time with us on this broad overview of user interface technologies. Be well, everyone, and thanks for joining us.